Good evening, YouTube. This is Johnny. I was looking at my YouTube channel. It's only been 10 hours since my last video, but hey, let it it's been 5 days since I made my last video, so I might as well make up for lost time. It is December the 20th, 2020. It is 8:58 at night here in West Michigan. It is 69 degrees inside the hermit hut. Today was another dry, kind of cloudy, cold day. No snow. I was looking at my Crooked Fingers live journal going back a couple of years ago, and this time of year the earth would be covered with snow and ice, just snow. But we have had no major snowfall thus far, and there's nothing in the future. Well, this next week, so we're supposed to have a green Christmas. So my last video, I showed you what my wife and I went to Grand Haven Cheap Stacks, which is the used bookstore for the Grand Haven Public Library, and I showed you all those books. But I didn't show you the thrift store books that I have gotten around here, where we live here in Holland. Like I've said in past videos, there's Bibles to Mexico, a couple blocks. There's Action House, which provides food, furniture, clothing, all kinds of things for the poor. And then there's a Goodwill just a couple of minutes from where we live, and I go around there every week. At least I try to, if the weather's permissible, and I look for used books. And plus I volunteer at the library used bookstore, the Book Nook, and I get books. And I haven't shown those books, and I want to get them down in the lower level, get them out of the living room. It's because I'm not going to read these at this present time in my existence. So I just want to get them down in the lower level tonight. And so first of all, what I read today at the Book Nook, I mean, all I really read today, like I said, I'm kind of out of it. I'm kind of spaced. I get up in the morning and, well, to be honest, my wife has been off from work. So when I get up in the morning, my wife is always usually up. And it's kind of hard for me to focus on anything in the mornings if my wife is around, because she's either talking to me or she's baking, or she likes the radio on. She likes listening to classical music in the morning, and you know, and it's kind of hard to get into a kind of mode to shut myself down. Now, I could go just to my study and close the door and read at my desk. I mean, there's no excuse. I suppose just in the mornings, I'm kind of burnt out. I get kind of tired, and I just kind of rest my brain. Now, I'm always writing in my diary in the morning, and I go online. I look at the news. I look at music reviews. I watch BookTube videos. I talk to my wife, and last couple mornings we've been doing errands, going grocery shopping, post office, drugstore, going to thrift stores, looking at used books, going out for lunch, things like that. And so yeah, but today I volunteered at the library used bookstore. I left around 9:50. Got home around 1:10. My wife just got back from doing errands and visiting friends. But at the Book Nook, I read this. I showed you this last night. Was that this morning? I got this at the Cheap Stacks. Out of Step, an unquiet life in the 20th century, an autobiography of Sidney Hook. It says here, out of the step, an unquiet life in the 20th century is philosopher Sidney Hook's memoir of his lifelong commitment to social justice and political freedom. From the era of the Great War and Woodrow Wilson through the Cold War and Ronald Reagan, there is hardly an important issue in which he has not spoken out, an academic controversy or political struggle in which he was not an active participant. Born to immigrant parents in a poor Jewish section of Brooklyn, Sidney Hook distinguished himself on the strength of intellect, on his capacities for lucid reasoning and tenacious argument. He began his public career as the West's most knowledgeable interpreter of Marx and has become one of the most outstanding opponents of communism. Out of Step is a dramatic story of changes in thought and sentiment during a period as crowded with revolutionary developments as any comparable era in human history. It is a story of a life dedicated to the principle that, in the author's words, quote, man's vocation ought to be the use of the art of intelligence in behalf of freedom. Most engrossing are Professor Hook's portraits of outstanding leaders from academic and public life: John Dewey, Albert Einstein, Mark Eastman, Bertrand Russell, Norman Thomas, Bertolt Brecht, Arthur Koestler, and many others. Out of Step is nothing less than a history of the intellectual combat that has shaped the contemporary world. So that's why I got this. I mean, like I said, I like reading about history and the lives of people. That's why I like biographies, memoirs, and letters. So I was reading this today. And I brought home from the book nook I collect John Mortimer's Rumpole, and this is Rumpole, Carte, which is just short stories from the Rumpole series. Now, my wife was out. Now, I'm not going to show you the thrift store books. I'm going to show you what the books my wife was out today, and she was in Douglas visiting a friend of hers who's quite elderly and who's slowly dying. But she stopped in Douglas Humane Society and she brought home books for me. So this is what my wife got me today and at the Douglas Humane Society. She got me this book, Prepare for Saints, Gertrude Stein, Virgil Thomas, and the Mainstreaming of American Modernism by Stephen Watson. Now I have two other books by Stephen Watson, The Birth of the Beat Generation, and I also have a book of his on Andy Warhol and the Andy Warhol and Studio something by him. But she didn't know I had those. But this is Stephen Watson's book on Gertrude Stein, Virgil Thomas, who was an American composer, and the Mainstreaming of American Modernism, Prepare for Saints. And she picked me up. One of my favorite writers is Penelope Lively, and this is her memoir, Dancing Fish and Ammonites, a memoir. It's kind of large print, but hey, you know, I didn't have it in my Penelope Lively collection. I read her all the time. Then my wife picked me up this Louis Theroux, who is the son of Paul Theroux, who writes novels and travel books. Call of the Weird, Travels in American Subcultures. My wife knows I like reading about bohemians and beatniks and hippies and eccentrics and madmen and subcultures, you know, punk culture, you know, death metal culture, black metal, jazz, folk, the 60s culture, troubadours, things like that. Then she picked me up a Martin Ames. I didn't have this, which I was surprised when I cataloged this in my library thing. I didn't have this one. The Zone of Interest by Martin Amos. So she got me those. My wife is always buying me books. Now these are the ones, next stack of books is books I got at local thrift stores around here. And this is a novel by Charles Dickens. Now I haven't read Charles Dickens since high school. But I collect his books, biographies, literary studies, all kinds of things. I didn't have this one. This is Charles Dickens' Martin Chuzzlewit. And it's a Penguin English Library, which is a picture of Charles Dickens. I gotta read Charles Dickens. And then I picked up this biography on Thomas Cromwell, Untold Story of Henry VIII's Most Faithful Servant by Tracy Borman. I collect biographies of British history. Then I picked this also up, The Rise of the Tudors, The Family That Changed English History by Chris Skidmore. I picked these up at Action House. And then I picked this one up. Now I got this one at Goodwill. Morris Sandoz, The Cattlemen. This is on Cattlemen in the American West. I have another book by her on some American Indian chief, which I can't remember right now. But I have a book by hers in American West collection. I think it's on Crazy Horse. Then I picked this book at the Humane Society, Religion for Atheists, Non-Believer's Guide to Use of Religion by Alain de Botton. I just showed you, recently I picked up two of his other books, The Architect of Happiness, and I picked up Status Anxiety. I have like 4 or 5 of his books now. It's more like philosophical reflections, you know, just it's nonfiction, just him talking about different subjects. Then I picked up a Paul Auster novel, which I have, but mine was an old paperback. This is a hardback Paul Auster, The Sunset Park, a novel. This is like in pristine condition. Mine was an old beat up paperback, but this is in perfect condition. Nice slipcover. So I got it for, I think I got it for 50 cents. Then I picked this book up. This is by Paul Horgan, who is a novelist, a very famous American historian of the West. He's written books on the Rio Grande River. He's written books on Santa Fe. He's written novels. He's written all kinds of things. And this is like selections of his writings of the American East and West. Selection from the writings of Paul Horgan, with an introduction by Henry Steele Commager. This is a volume in the series of novels by Henry Roth, which I have downstairs. I didn't have this one, The Mercy of a Rude Stream. This is volume 4 of the Requiem for Harlem. So I didn't have this in my. I have the 3 other volumes, and this completes the series. And Requiem from Harlem. The first volume is called Sleep, Shifting Landscape. Volume 1 of The Mercy of Rude Stream is A Star Shines Over Mount Morris Park. Volume 2 is the Driving Rock on the Hudson. Volume 3 of The Mercy of Rude Stream, From Bondage. And this is Volume 4, Requiem for Harlem. So, and then I picked up a David Lodge novel. I have this in an old paperback. This is his novel Thinks. And then I picked up a novel by Richard Rusco I didn't have. He's one of my favorite writers, Chances Are. So I picked this at Goodwill. So I got all these books for a couple dollars. Can't go wrong. Everything I collect. You know, I don't go into thrift stores or used book sales just grabbing stuff. I know what writers I want that I collect. I read reviews. I read literary criticism. You know, I've educated myself in the history of literature, British and American literature, and I'm always when I go, I know what to look for. I mean, I don't just now I do buy books that just kind of interest me, that provoke my interest. There are kind of like this book, like here, Louis Theroux, Call of the Weird. Now this is not something I collect, but I would buy it because I'm interested in these kinds of subjects. And I always collect memoirs. This is Penelope Lively's memoirs. I said I collect the writings of Martin Amis. And I have a huge Gertrude Stein collection. I collect books on American modernism, European modernism. I collect books on that time period in European and American history. There's a picture of Gertrude Stein. And so, yeah. And I collect books on John Mortimer, his Rumpole series. And I read biographies of leading intellectuals in America and in Europe, especially these are a memoir. I like biographies. I like reading about American history from 1890 until probably up until, I suppose, the 60s and 70s. Now, I'll read things from the 80s and 90s, but most of what we are experiencing today, you can trace back into, the 40s and 50s and 60s and the turn of the century. So I was really enjoying this today. I was reading at the Book Nook. So that's my Friday reads. Tomorrow's a Saturday. Well, I'm going to watch football, write in my diary. My wife's going to sleep. She went to work tonight. She doesn't want to work anymore. My wife just wants to retire and quit. But she's got 5 more months after now. 6 more months. Well, really 6.5 months. But she's just sick of working. So I hope you'll have a good weekend. Thank you for your comments and new subscribers. Do pray that you have a good reading week. And I'm going to download this video. And until next time, bye.